Hello, welcome. I'm Lisa Christensen, owner of Watercolor Cards, and this workshop or class is all about mastering liquid watercolors with easy techniques for beginners. We are going to walk through how to make beautiful floral cards. It's going to be a lot of fun. If you find this content to be at all interesting, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. All right, ready to get your fingers inky? I thought so. Let's get started. Liquid watercolor is so vibrant and beautiful to play with. Liquid watercolor is a little bit different than re-inkers. There's a different binder in them, so I'm guessing that there's gum arabic in the watercolors, and there is a different binder in the re-inkers that make it harder to blend. So I like having both re-inkers and liquid watercolor. Alright, so liquid watercolor is very vibrant. They have beautiful colors. You can get some really pretty textures in them. Here's one that isn't finished, but you can see all the different textures. I recommend taking like an hour or two in an afternoon or morning or weekend and just playing with your liquid watercolor. I have my liquid watercolor ready to go, and I have 3 brushes. I have a round, like it's just a round brush. It's a size 12. It's one of my new favorites. I have a smaller round brush, a size 8. And then I have a 1/2 inch angular brush, so I can make some really fun leaves and floral looking type things. But the angular brush you can also get with a round tip, but it's just not as easy. So that's why I have my angular brush ready. And then you're going to want watercolor paper. I cut this down to 2 1/4 by 3 1/2. It doesn't matter. Like it's just to play with. But if you wanted to do a full card panel, I do 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and then if I need to, I can cut down some of the edges. Doesn't always need to happen, but it's there. And then this is just a practice sheet on 140-pound watercolor paper, not watercolor cardstock. Do not use watercolor cardstock. Use watercolor paper and you will be much happier with it. And then on top of that, I just have a washcloth. You could use a paper towel, but you'll probably go through a bunch of paper towels. So I use a washcloth and my paints, and so I will refer to this a little bit at a time, but right now I'm going to put it to the side and I'm going to show you a little bit about liquid watercolor and why I love it. So liquid watercolor is liquid in itself. It has pigment, dye pigment in it, and you can use it almost just straight from the tube. So I'm just going to kind of, I don't know, make some swirly lines. Okay, so that is really fun. It's very dark, but I like having a spray bottle handy too. But when I spray it, it just kind of goes everywhere, and it's so fun. And I can spray it all the way down and get some really fun looks to it. This is why I have a washcloth, because then I can just wash it when I'm done. Let's see what yellow does with it, right? I just love this texture, and maybe I'm just gonna go right in and see what happens. Like we are just playing. We're just getting ready to really play, and I'm just gonna zoom in a little bit. Yep. And you can already tell that the yellow just wants to turn green right away. And yes, the paper will do its thing, and I'm okay with that. This is more like a variegated wash right here. This is what I would call a variegated wash, and I think I'm gonna spray it a little bit more. Sometimes I feel like I get a lot of pigment off, but I want some more of this yellow. It's really pretty. Reminds me almost like ocean or being in the water or something, because that yellow is going to turn into green and that blue is still there. And we're just playing. So if you like to play with your watercolor or your ink, this is perfect. Alright, now that would be called a variegated wash, where there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just really pretty though. Another pro tip is to make sure your whole watercolor paper is wet so that the ink will flow. And that's really kind of pretty. I think that's going to work. I
think I'm going to add just a little bit more yellow right into here. And so it makes for really fun backgrounds really fast. Like you don't, I'm not working too hard at this background, right? I'm just playing with color, and that's like the best part of my job, is to play with color and see how they interact with each other. So whenever I get a new medium, this is exactly what I do, is I play with my color. I make what I call energy washes. I got that term from Jean Haynes. She's a marvelous watercolor artist, and so she has said, like, if you want to get really good with your watercolor, do energy washes like every day. Just put paint on and let it play and see what happens. So there we go. That's really fun. Now, of course, we can add to it. We could stamp something, heat emboss it, and then put the ink over it, and that's really fun. We could also just stamp on top of it and emboss it that way too. Or we can put a die cut on, or we can die cut this. Like, there's so many options, but for now, we're just going to leave that here. I'll let it dry, and we'll go to a second thing. So I wanted to share lifting. Lifting is another really wonderful way to kind of use your watercolor. So let's do, I'm thinking of a sky, and I really like well, to be quite honest, I really like Cookie Monster, and I don't know if Blue Raspberry will really work. Tropical Punch might work. Let's do Tropical Punch and Cookie Monster. The Corn Blue reminds me of Ultramarine, but it's really, really thick. And so I don't necessarily always like Ultramarine, but with your little mat right here, with your glass mat, you can actually put some on your glass mat. Ooh, and it hopefully won't stain. I haven't actually tried it on this glass mat, so I'm hopeful. But right now, I'm going to get my brush wet, and I'm going to get my whole paper wet, because when we are, like, if you think about clouds or lifting, like, I'm going to lift out pigment and make like clouds. I'm going to get this all wet so it's really shiny. See how shiny it is? That's the water on top of the paper. That's what we want to see. And now I can get into my watercolor, and I can just really add my pigment to it. And I'm probably not going to need the other color like I thought, but there, you get a really pretty, almost flat wash. It's not totally flat, but it's pretty close. Alright, now I'm going to just add some texture, because I think the sky usually has some texture to it, right? And this is just splattering. I'm just splattering it. And of course I have my washcloth, so I don't mind splattering. Now I'm going to take like a Kleenex. This is just a simple Kleenex. There's nothing fancy about it. And I can just kind of go in where I think I want to get rid of. And I can, yeah. And honestly, like, I feel, usually when you work with landscapes, it's lighter at the bottom and darker at the top. And so now I have this beautiful panel that I can use for a sky. Maybe I'll add some birds or something to it, but I also want to just add a little bit more water right in there. If you are lucky, if you are careful enough, the watercolor pigment wants to stay on top of the paper, and so if you catch it in time, you can kind of blend it with your watercolor, with your brush, and the watercolor just kind of goes away. But that takes some practice, and I know it just takes practice. So when there's a sheen to it, that's when you can really play with your pigments. But down here it's not very wet, so I can't do anything down here. But up here I still can, because it's wet. But I really like it how it is, so I'm going to leave that alone. But that's a fun cloud motif that I think could really work for lots of things. I could do it from mostly landscapes, but you know, sometimes I think it's fun to have like a critter on it, and I don't know. Anyways, I like lifting. I use that a lot for sea and sky, and it's just fun. Okay, so now glazing. So salt, I will show the salt technique. It's really pretty easy. You just add salt to a wet wash. So let me go get my salt and I'll be right back. Alright, who here likes ice cream? Who likes to make their own ice cream, right? So if you have ice cream salt, get it out and then put some table salt in. So I just put table salt and ice salt into this mix of salt, and that will give me a whole bunch of different textures. So you can see that I have the thicker crystals of salt and the little, I would not use your special Himalayan salt or your gourmet salt, but ice cream salt and table salt is really my mix here. Alright, so I'm thinking of like a floral motif, and so I picked out jalapeno and pineapple, and I'm going to do kind of the same variegated wash, but it's going to just kind of be on the paper. I almost always like to mix my watercolor on the paper, so I almost always have my paper wet, and then I will just add my watercolor. And so what I'm hopeful is that I can make a really fun little floral motif with this yellow, and then this green is going to be on the back of it. And what I want to do, and you'll notice that I almost use this as a brush. And now I'm just going to add, this is very, very, very wet. Exactly what I was hoping for. Okay, and I like having a wet wash. I don't know if I don't want my flower to look very, like this is just a underpainting, but I want the salt to show up. So it's looking good. I have the big rock crystals, and I will definitely put those right where I want it at. Oh, that one didn't stay. That's okay. Alright, and now I can pinch and just do table salt kind of wherever. This is just a practice, so I'm just going to really play around with the salt. And then I'm going to take my mist, and I'm just going to spray a tad bit just to get that salt really activated. Okay, I'm back with the floral part of my video. And so this, you can kind of see this. This is why I love having different types of salt. This salt made this little texture right up here. I'm going to see how that salt just kind of like moved the water out. Isn't that so pretty? So I can just take that off if there's still salt or watercolor. But how fun is that? Same thing here. That probably isn't completely dry, but that's okay. But usually I just, you know, I don't really mess with it too much, and then I like having a paper towel because I can blot if I need to. And sometimes it will look very much like salt, and I'm okay with that for the most part. I try not to get my fingers too inky when I get the salt off. And there's no right way to get the salt off, just however you think is right. I'm just going to add some yellow right into there and right into here. I'm going to leave the middle alone for now. That's looking quite lovely. And of course this is an intuitive painting, so it's not going to look, it's going to remind you of a sunflower, but it's not going to be a sunflower. I'm actually going to go right in straight into my pigment. I'm not going to use, this is called charging, so you can kind of see where the water is. So I'm going to go right, I'll show you. So like I'm going to dump like right here, And I'm just going to add a little bit right like that, and it's going to move on its own, and that's what I'm looking for. And I'm going to do that all around the sunflower to give it a very natural looking look. It might be a little too much. We'll see. Yeah, it's just a blob of yellow, but that's okay. That's kind of what I'm going for. All right, it's gonna, again, watercolor. It just takes some time and lots of time to play. I'm gonna do the same thing with this, but I'm going to add water. I'm gonna add just a, there's gonna be a line, there's gonna be a dry line in between where the yellow is versus where the water is. You see where that break is? Yep, there's a break right there. So I'm going to put the green right into that space. And watercolor is transparent, so I'll be able to see the background, but I won't be able to, no one will be able to say like, oh, you use salt, right? Because it'll just look natural. It'll look very organic. Just like that. So we're glazing over the salt technique. And I find it absolutely gorgeous for florals. Yeah. So you can still see that salt texture, but it's just not in your face anymore. And that's what I love about using salt. And I won't use it on all the things. And I really like how some of that yellow got into the green. So maybe I'll do that a little bit more. And of course I like drama in my painting, so I'm going to use the dark part of the green, and I'm going to probably leave this the way it is. I'm just going to add a little bit of water and let that yellow just kind of spread a little bit. Okay, well, it could be a sunflower. Let's see. I'm trying to think where I want my stem. That would look really pretty. We'll do that. So I decided that I wanted my flower to be going, the head to be kind of going towards the left. And so I gotta make a stem. And to make a stem, I'm gonna have to lift. So I'm gonna use my brush, I'm gonna clean my brush, dab my brush off on a paper towel or the washcloth, and I'm gonna do this until I get a good amount out of it. That doesn't mean I'm done, it just means it's getting there. Okay, that's looking good. I can always go back in a little bit and add some more darker green to it, but it's looking good right there. I'm going to leave it. Alright, so because this is a very loose watercolor floral, I want to leave all of that alone. I'm afraid that you can still see the salt. You can still see the salt background on the floral, which makes it really pretty. Alright, I'm going to let this dry, and I'll come back and I'll add just a little bit of detail for the flower. Okay, I have this very much zoomed in close, so I'm going to take some of this yellow, and I'm just going to add, I'm probably going to move this around a little bit, but I know that this is probably where my center is going to be, so I'm just going to kind of make it happen. And then right here, I feel like this is going to be like folded in on itself, right? So we're just going to, and it's not going to be a perfect, like, oh my gosh, that's definitely a sunflower. It's going to look probably more just like a yellowy floral bit. So this is glazing again. And what I'm doing is I'm just making a hard edge right here, and I'm softening the other side of the edge. And I'll be doing the same onto this side too. You can kind of see it. And I'm going to probably need a little bit of honey to make it darker. can always use like an orange or a yellow, but because I have honey and I really like honey, it reminds me of quinacridone yellow. It's one of my favorites. And of course this is just a suggestion of a yellow flower. It could be a sunflower. It could not be a sunflower. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a yellow flower. A yellow circly flower. Okay. I'm liking that. And I'm going to go... Now this one is going to be a little bit more trickier because I do want a little bit more petals to be defined. So I'm going to take in this yellow. It's pretty much like painting with ink at this point. I'm just cleaning my brush out so I'm softening the edges. And you don't have to. You could also use like if you like pen and ink, you could do that. Or you could use a stamp and just say, oh, I need a stamp that has some line qualities that's about the yellowish size, and make it happen. Or you can stamp before and then just paint. You know, there's lots of ways to go about doing the same thing. This is just me being me. And pretty soon I'm going to be... I just wanted to get some pigment onto the paper. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some of that yellow right dab in here. I love quinacridone yellow. It's one of my favorites. I think that's going to work. It looks more like a fall flower than anything, but I think it's going to really work well when I get my dark. And there we go. That's what it's going to really look like. And now I can even go back in here because there's these flowers that are... So I grow sunflowers, and every summer they start to fold in on itself, and they're really pretty that way. I don't know why, other than the fact that their head is so big and the stem cannot hold it. But I sure get some lovely shapes from them. I don't know what this petal is doing, but we're gonna go with that. Okay. And I didn't love those lines, so I'm gonna erase those a little bit. Okay, that's looking good. Now I'm just going with a darker, like almost a brown. I might actually do like a dark blue with this is blue corn, and then I'm going to use the same yellow. I'm just going to make this really a dark. I almost need some purple. And I go in with Huckle. Oh, and I have chocolate truffle too. I just don't want it to be black, so I'm going to add some of that chocolate truffle. Maybe. I don't know why it's not going. Come on. There we go. Just wasn't pressing it hard enough. I'm okay having a little bit of the blue into that dark truffle. And now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stipple. I don't want to, like, the seed head, there's a bunch of seeds on sunflowers anyways. So I want it to look like there's seeds. I like that. And then right in, I might just, probably better not mess with that too much. I'm going to go in with my green jalapeno again. I'm just going to, with my wet brush, I really want the stem with my, this, I'm just gonna go in and I'm gonna do that. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. But my hope is that it will just define that stem. And then I'm going to blend that out all the way until I literally cannot see that blend happening. That's really pretty. Okay, this is turning into a fall card, but that's okay. All right, now other way. I'm going to do the stem the other way. So I'm going to go right in here. I see that line. I see where my stem is. I'm just going to add water and then I'm going to charge it. And I truly believe that anyone can do this. I don't think I have special magical powers. I'm just showing you how I paint. If you can paint with simple lines, I think you can do this. And then I'm just going to let this kind of do its own thing. Because it's already kind of, I have this line done. So I think I'm going to leave it. If I mess with it anymore, it's going to look funny. And I really like how it is. I think this probably should have been a little bit thicker, but I don't know if I can really fix it. Darn it. But I can lift up a little bit. It just won't be a solid line, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be. There we go. I'm calling this done. That is one way to use salt as a background and just to paint a flower. And it's not perfect. I don't think anything in nature is perfect. I see a lot of things that I'm like, okay, well, it works. Right in here, for example, I think I could add a little bit more definition, but I'm afraid to mess with it too much. And I see that like my yellow just kind of went too much out of the green, but I can fix that just a tad bit. I think that will work, and I can always make this one just a tad bit bigger too. Yeah. All right, now I can be good. Now I like the shape, and I'm going to call this done. All right, and we did this all with liquid watercolor. How pretty is that? I just think this is a lovely piece that will be perfect for a water. All right, so I painted this. It's not completely done yet. I was on like the second layer, and I just need to add some more of that darker color into the middle of it. But I wanted to show you kind of where I get to this point. And then on this one, I'll actually do the detail. So I did not actually draw this. I did this with just my brush. I don't love to draw. I will draw, and I am actually pretty good at drawing, but I would rather just paint. And so there's two rules of thoughts here. If you really need a stamped image, you totally can. You can also draw a very simple, like, I'm just gonna add. Alright, ready to take your watercolor to maybe a next level? I'm just gonna draw, simply draw. Now this is just a guideline, this is not a for real thing, and I'm just gonna, actually I need that to be like this, so when I'm drawing my 5-petal flower, it doesn't be whatever flower you want it to be, I am it's definitely not in the center. That's okay. And this might be more of a 7-layer flower. It's gonna be more like a 7-layer flower. Right, it's just kind of loose and fluid and fun. And it's not going to have much of a... It's just going to be on like kind of this towards the side, and then maybe I'll have a small sentiment right here. That looks good. Or maybe, yeah, it's definitely going right there. Okay, so now that I have a plan, I can just kind of use my kneaded eraser as needed and just kind of erase some of these lines that I don't need. And that looks about right. So now you can kind of see the lines. Yep. Okay. I'm going to wet this paper, and I'm going to have my pineapple pigment ready to go. I've got my pineapple pigment ready, and now I can just go with it. And I'm going to start kind of in the middle of the flower. I'm going to use my big, this is a 12-inch brush by Blick, and I'm just going to add my watercolor, liquid watercolor especially, will only go where liquid watercolor, where water is. So if I don't want watercolor in a certain spot, I just don't put water there. I call this water doodling. And this is such a fun way to like feel distracted. Okay, you can kind of see where the light is and where I've put a whole bunch of water. See, that's where the water is going to go. And now I can take my pigment and I'm just going to add it. I'm not even using a brush, I'm using the tip, and I'm just gently putting pressure down. And I just want the water to just kind of go everywhere. And it is. It is such a fun technique. There. Now it looks kind of a mess. That's okay. It won't look like a mess for a while. Okay, now I can take that brush and I'm just going to move the pigment around the paper. And sometimes I can see where I messed up, where I didn't have water. Yeah, that's looking really pretty. And I'm just going to add the center with yellow. Now I can go in, I'm going to clean my brush up a little bit, dab it off, so it's just a damp wet brush. And then with this one I used Cherry Pop. So let's do that again. And I just went around, I just kind of added some drops around that circle. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, she totally messed it up. I did not. Again, this is a lifting and pulling sort of thing. And so that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm just going to... I'm lifting more than pushing the pigment around. I want the yellow to stay yellow, but I also want that to look very organic. So like sometimes I just have to... This is one of those things that you just have to kind of go with it. If you don't like, it's very much, you don't have control, but it is a very fun, mindful experience because you have to be in the moment. Making sure there's no pigment because I'm going to lift that. I'm moving that. And you'll find that I'm probably gonna have to. You could almost do this as a hibiscus too. That'd be really pretty. All right. That's looking really good. This is looking very botanically-ish. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to let it dry and do its thing. I am going to take out some of that red. And then I'm going to flood it with some yellow. You can see that I'm really getting rid of a whole bunch of yellow. red. Sorry, a lot of red on my there. All right, now I can go back in. I'm just going to add some of that yellow back in. I'm okay with it mingling in with the red, right? That's kind of fun and pretty. So if you think about this, if it's still wet, you can really add that pigment into the floral. And then right here, I'm just adding a dot. I'm moving that around. All right, we're gonna let that dry naturally. I think I added too much pigment right in there. That's all right. I'd rather have what I need than not enough. And yellow is so forgiving that I'm okay. All right, it's looking quite, it almost looks, it reminds me of a little tiger lily, but we'll see. I love these intuitive watercolors because you just never know exactly what you're gonna get until you add the pigment down. I mean, I have a general idea, but sometimes they have a mind of their own. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. That's looking really pretty though. And now what I did, I say I'm gonna let that dry. Now what I did is I took my wet brush and I moved that watercolor around to the background. What this does is it makes it so the background is not so white. And then once it dries just a tad bit, I'll go back in and I'll go with the green, or with the, I'm going to go with just a light green. And I think I want this, and I know it looks like I'm ruining my paper. I'm really truly not. It just looks like she just messed it all up. What am I doing? I am making my painting look better. This, what I'm doing is called atmospheric watercolor. And now I'm going to take lime zest. This was sweet basil and it was just a little too dark for me. And I know that watercolor goes where watercolor wants to go. So I'm very hopeful that I can just kind of make it happen. I don't want to lose all of that beautiful color. And like I said, like my pencils were just a guideline. It kind of does what you want it to do. It doesn't always follow directions very well. I think in art, that's part of the joy. Okay. I am gonna need a detailed brush for this. Right in here, I'm gonna need to add some darker green. And I'm probably gonna need to add some detail, but that's okay. I got a good start. And I really love the lime zest because if you're just kind of, you don't know yet quite what you want your background to be, lime zest for floral is always a good choice. There's a lot of yellow in lime zest, so you can really get some good colors. Okay, this is happening. It's looking like a mess. That's okay. It's a process, right? It's not a mess, I promise. It's gonna look beautiful. We just have to add some more layers to it. So because I feel like we just need a little bit of darkness, and we need some more drama. I'm just gonna, with my brush, very light.
Alright, to finish up this background, I am just using my brush and I am just adding green where I feel like it needs it. I'm really, right now what I'm doing is adding form to my painting. So I want the petals to be more distinct and I want the background to be darker. So to do that, I'm just using my brush to create lines where the background is and where the petals are. And that's what you see right now. I'm taking my time and I'm just adding lines to form those petals. I use a very gentle touch. Once it's dried, like ta-da right now, then I'm going to add some more green, and I'm just going to go back in with my lines, and I'm going to define that a little bit more. I'm also going to define those petals. And I'm defining those petals first because I really want the gold to stand out. And once I get my petals defined, it's easier to do the background. As you can see, I'm going like with the curvature of the petals as much as I can. And that when we glaze on top of another color, it really adds a lot of life and vibrancy into the painting. And it really, in my opinion, sets you apart from the okay artists to the beautiful artists. So now I'm going to go back in with it being just a little bit wet, and I'm going to define more of those edges. A lot of watercolor artists have to spend hours on the layering side of things, and so that is what I'm doing. But in this, this is double speed, so it's taking me twice as long to do this, but it's really well worth the effort. When it's all said and done, it really is just going to pop, and it's going to look like a beautiful floral. But it does take time. I'm softening edges, I'm defining shapes, and there's no like rhyme or reason, just wherever I feel like it needs more pink, I add more pink. If I think it needs more yellow, I'll add more yellow. And for that, I really wanted that defined petal, which later I decide I wish I wouldn't have, but that's okay. The sentiment's going to go on top of it and it'll be just fine. Alright, so there's the finished product.
This flower. So I'm going to take my toffee, maybe my toffee, and I'm going to just put it in the middle. I already have some red and some green. It's not going to make much of a difference, but I just need something. And I'm going to use a regular round brush for this, and I'm just kind of mixing it on my palette. That looks about right. And we're just gonna stipple. Stipple is just a whole bunch of little dots. And I'm just gonna do a couple like that. And I think I'll just do excuse me. I'm just going to do some lines. Maybe it's like the inside of a, I don't know, poppy. This is my imagination. I suppose if you had a pretty flower. There we go. I like that. That works. And I think I'm trying to decide where I want my sentiment to be. I think I'm going to do a simple strip and do one or two right here, just to break up the flower. This petal is not exactly the right size. It probably should have been more like this, but that's okay. That's why we can break it up right here and it won't look bad.
Now onto the rose. So I'm going to use an angular brush, and you can see that there's a bit of an angle, and then I'm going to use a round brush, and I'm picking up some Lollipop on my angled brush, and I'm going to be making some curves that look kind of like a C, and I'm using like light pressure and then some extra pressure on the brush. It kind of reminds me of one stroke painting, and I'm just going to go around like as if I'm growing my rose leaves and get this beautiful little rose started. Now I have a clean damp brush, and I'm just softening one side of the edge, and it does take practice, so I say get some paper out and just practice these roses, and the more you practice, the better it's going to be. and there's no rhyme or there is a rhyme and reason to what I'm doing. I am cleaning my brush, dabbing it off on the towel. That's where you see all the pink. And I'm doing that consistently every time. And now what I'm going to do is add just a little bit of yellow water right now into the rose. And I'm just going to dot in some of that yellow. And I'm actually painting in more of that yellow just to give the rose a depth to it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to look like there's some yellow in those petals. And then we'll go back in and define more of that shape once it dries. And now I'm going to take my lime zest and I'm just going to do some cute little leaves. I am using my angled brush for that. Once I get kind of a general shape, I just add darker pigment to it. And I'm just using the sweet basil almost as like a brush. And then I have my brush to just add a little bit more lines into the sweet basil. Alright, now I'm going to do one more leaf, and it's just going to be kind of loose and fluid, kind of just a fun little thing to try. And now, I really like that, but I also want another rose on the other side of that, so that's what I will be doing in just a second. I'm going to add some more leaves. I like lime zest because I can really kind of play with my shapes and get some pretty shapes that way. If you are new to watercolor, I really love playing with liquid watercolor and just using my shapes to make organic shapes like this, using my brush to make organic shapes. And also, I highly recommend just adding pigment to the paper and then using that pigment to move on the paper. It is so much fun and so exhilarating, in my opinion. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking the watercolor that's kind of already like loose and not dried yet, and I'm just kind of moving it around the paper. That way I can just kind of have this built-in background, and you see that I'm going to be doing the whole thing in just that light green background. Once it's dried, I actually decided, oh, okay, I want to do another rose, so I picked up that green, and now the paper is just a little bit wet, but I can go in with my Lollipop and I can just make some cute little roses. Again, another rose in just the light pressure, hard pressure, light pressure, hard pressure, in like shapes of a C, as in cat. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of that pigment to define those C shapes. And I'm just making a rose, and it's just as simple as that. And now what I'll do is I'm going to add a little bit more of that yellow. I'm going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll define those lines a bit more. Now I'm just going to use some more of that lime zest, and it's going to just come from the tube, and sweet basil. This is sweet basil. I already have lime zest on. Now I'm just layering my sweet basil liquid watercolor onto the card, and I'm just going to make some more shapes to define the leaves a little bit. I wanted my background to be just a tad bit darker than my rose. Sometimes I feel like that's for dramatic effect. And I'm just going to finish this up real quick. There's a little bit of things that I see that I want to just kind of make a little bit more prominent. I need a center right in here, and that's really my problem right now. And I kind of want to add some greens right here, so I'll probably do that in just a second too. But I want to make sure a little goes a long way. When in doubt, just do a little. I'm just going to smooth my edges a little bit, and I think I'm good there. I'm going to take the sweet basil, and I'm just going to use my brush and make some details. I could paint flowers all day like this, so I'm just using the tip of my brush. I'm going to just add some veins.
Not a whole lot, just a little. This one looks like it needs some veins right in there. There. I think it just adds a little bit more artistic quality to it, maybe. And that one, I really like the lines, so I didn't really want to change that too much. There we go. There, that's perfect. That makes it look like that I'm ready for a sentiment right here. I really like that. I'm going to call it done. And then I will just stamp a sentiment right there. Alright, I'm just going to go through my process. So I found stamps that work with this, with what I want it to say and the size. So now I can just put them right on here. I'm going to use a die cut and cut them out. I could not, but the lines are just dark enough that I thought I would stamp and die cut the sentiments. Usually I try to save enough space, and maybe I could right here, but I really want my sentiment to be right here, so it's just worth die cutting. And the sentiments came from the Sun Dry Sentiments from Tailored Expressions. I love the typography on this. They really did an awesome job. I just love it. So anyways, that's what I'm doing, and I'm going to place the stamps, Happy Birthday and You Are Amazing, on my cardstock, and I'm going to keep my dies where I can see them so I don't lose them. And I know I use Lollipop and Pineapple, but Lollipop and Pineapple kind of turned into orange, and so I'm hoping that the guava ink will work with it, and I won't know until I stamp it, but I'd rather stamp it and see if I love it, because if I don't love it, then I can just stamp it again. And I might even decide to go with green. I think either one would work, so I might try a stamped one of green too. That works, and I think that will look just perfect. So that's what we're going to go with, and now I can just die cut these. So when I die cut, I'm just going to put this right here, and I'm going to tape it down so it's like perfect, you know. And I got some tape right here. This is just washi tape that is just in my craft room. It was the first one I grabbed, and so anyways, there's that one, and then I can do the Happy Birthday one, and I'll send it through my die cut machine. And if I needed to make like a whole bunch of them, I would tape these two together. But since
Alright, now that I have the cute sentiments all cut out, I can then adhere those to the card bases so that I'm just getting that ready. And you'll see that I have like the perfect sentiment for those cards. I just clean my stamp off on the Misti with the paper, and then they're clean and I can put it back in the sheet. So that's a time saver for me. And now I have a sentiment that I had picked out from Plot Twist from Tailored Expressions. I don't believe it's available anymore. I thought it was, and when I looked after I recorded this, I realized that it was not available. But it's one of my favorites. This sentiment comes from a quote from Walt Disney, and it's from Plot Twist. The sentiments that I just used for the cutouts was a sun-dried sentiment set from Tailored Expressions too. I love their sentiments because they are made with red rubber, and I get a really good crisp, clean line whenever I stamp. I'm using sweet basil to match my leaves, and I use the Misti to make sure that my sentiments are perfect. Alright, I'm going to use a organic background stamp. Any background stamp will work. This came from Tailored Expressions. It was a Stamp Joy exclusive, and it just had some leaves on it, but any organic background stamp would work. What I'm doing is I'm just adding a little bit of glue to the back of this cardstock, placing it on my Misti, and then I'm going to take the background stamp, place that on the cardstock, and then put the Misti cover on so it'll secure it. And now I'm going to use cinnamon brown ink, and I'm going to cover the whole background stamp with ink. And again, these red rubber stamps, really you just need one impression and it's perfect. And now I can go ahead and layer my 2 pieces of cardstock with it, and that's about it for that card. I'll be assembling it in just a second. And I'm just alright. This is my favorite part, is when I can assemble the cards. So I'm using the Simple Strips Friendship, and I found like something about sunshine. You are my sunshine, and let your light shine. I think sunflowers are perfect for like sunshine sentiments, and so that's what I'm doing. I'm just using those adhesive strips, and just backing those sentiments, and that's what I'll be doing for all my sentiments for the rest of these cards. When I'm placing my sentiments, I want to make sure that they are straight, that they look well placed, and so you'll see me take my time placing them just the right spot. I also make sure that I have adhesive on the back of my cut sentiment that is not going to be seen, so I do take my time and I cut just the right amount. The stuff I don't use goes back on the sheet, so I can use it for another time. But I do love these little adhesive strips. Anyways, if you found this video to be at all helpful, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate your support. And now I have 4 watercolor cards ready to go, and I enjoyed the afternoon of painting. I also used the top fold sugar cube card bases, and I'll just use my adhesive and glue them onto the card bases. I really love using watercolor paper to paint on watercolor, and then I love using card bases to attach my watercolor paper onto a card base, and that's what you see me doing. And then I just adhere it with a tape gun. Whew, are your fingers all inky, and is your heart full of wonderful color? I sure hope so. Get out there and paint. Use your liquid watercolors to make some beautiful florals. And if you found this video to be helpful, or you would like to see more content like this, subscribe. I produce content every Thursday, and I sure appreciate your support. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy getting your fingers inky and your brushes wet.